Hello. Today I am reviewing The Outsiders. I'm also drinking tea. We've reviewed The English Breakfast from Taylor's of Harrogate before. So this book, I actually read it last year in 8th grade for school, and it was written by S.E. Hinton, who was a teenager in the 1960s when she wrote it. Now, I will admit, when I first saw this book on our reading list, I said to myself, a 40-year-old man wrote this. No, a 40-year-old man did not write this. A 16-year-old girl wrote this in 1967. Well, she published it in 1967. And the story is set in 1963, and it's about a group of teenage boys who are greasers. And the greasers have sort of a rivalry with the socias, and that's short for socials. So the socias are the academic group, basically. They're the kids who have everything. Their parents bought them cars. They get all A's. They're the typical teenagers you would think of when you think 1960s. And then the greasers are the ones that grease their hair, and they get in a lot of fights or rumbles. And a good example of the greasers would be Lenny and Squiggy from Laverne and Shirley, which was actually set in a similar time period to The Outsiders and has a lot of the same vocabulary. I'm fairly certain I have heard at least one person on Laverne and Shirley say, "Let's rumble." We picked it from a choice of 4 different books, and we were supposed to read it for 2 or 3 chapters every day until we got finished with it. And introducing you to the main characters, Pony Boy and his brothers Soda Pop and Daryl. I think Derry got the best name out of the 3 of them. And they have a few friends, 2-Bit and Steve and Dallas. Now, Dallas is a different sort of greaser. He's from New York, and he's a hood. And I think Pony Boy actually says at one point in the book there's a line between greasers and hoods, and that line doesn't exist for Dally. And one pet peeve I have about the movie for The Outsiders is that the movie has Dallas played by Matt Dillon, who does a really good job playing Dallas, but doesn't look much like the book description of him. Because Dallas was pixie-like, he had a sharp, pointed chin. It said he had, I think impish sort of features, and I don't know whether it actually said he had pointy ears or not, but for the first, 4 chapters, I was imagining him as sort of like Spock. Quickly realized that was not the case. And he's also blonde. Matt Dillon was not blonde in The Outsiders. And the story itself, apart from just describing the characters for the first chapter or 2, really sets off in about chapter 3, which is when you start seeing the dynamics between the boys. And without giving the entire plot away, 2 of them run off and hide in a barn. No, it's not a barn, it's a church. It's a church on a hill. As you get more into it, it gets to be less of just a normal teenage fiction book and more of, I think, what S.E. Hinton's critique of the society in the 60s was, because one of the brothers, Derry, the oldest of the 3 Curtis brothers, he could have been a social. He had really good grades, he was a football star, but his parents were in a car accident, and they didn't have enough money even before the accident, so after their parents died, Derry had to take care of them, and working that many hours, he couldn't go to college. He had to work as a roofer, which Pony Boy says multiple times that if it weren't for them, Derry could have been a soc. And so it's a bit of a social commentary, not in the way that MASH was a commentary on the war. It's a little bit more open in that Pony Boy is very irritated with the world And as a main character, he's very good at telling how the story goes with minimal biases. And the story itself was written 60 years ago, so you would think it's probably not that popular anymore, but much like Star Trek, it has continued to be popular. It didn't have 15 spin-offs, but the movie it came out in the 80s, and it had a bunch of actors who would very soon become popular, but weren't quite as popular as they are now then. So people like Patrick Swayze and C. Thomas Howell, Ralph Macchio, Rob Lowe, Tom Cruise. Every time I think of Rob Lowe, I think of Atkins. And this particular copy that I have has got several extras. So it's got a note from S.C. Hinton at the front, as well as a reader's guide. Is it a reader's guide or is it it's a discussion guide? It's got a bunch of different questions that you can ask, because I think this was supposed to be like a school version of the book. But overall, I did several projects on this book. I recommend it. I think it's a good book. It's a good story. It doesn't take very long to read if you're not breaking it up into 5 chapters. I think I read it for the second time in 2 days on a car ride and then in a doctor's waiting room. I think this book was written with like teenagers, 8th graders, 9th graders, 10th graders in mind, because that's the age of most of the characters. I think Tony Boy is 13 or 14. And it's written for that age group, but I think it would be... It really depends on the reading level, but anybody over 10, I think this would be a good book for. My friends and I read it together, and I asked them yesterday if anyone wanted to say anything about it. One of my friends said that she enjoyed it more than she thought she would. The same is true for me. And then basically the only friend that we have who didn't read the book, she read a different book that was assigned, said that she didn't read it, but she still feels the loss in the story because we've talked about it so much. I think you should give it a try. You might even like it. And until next time, make sure to make time for Teen a Good Book.